Welcome back to the Fishing Daily podcast. This is episode 3 of series 5. And today I'm joined by Master Fishmonger Hayden Cutting from Carlisle. And Hayden will be telling us today why he got into fishmongering and why it's an important trade. Welcome, Hayden.
How are we doing? You all right?
Good. And you?
Yeah, not too bad.
Well, thank you for joining us here. And listen, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into fishmongering.
So I've been in the trade now for nearly 13 years. Prior to this, I was in construction trade, but I enjoyed the work of being out and about, but it just wasn't fulfilling. I didn't feel like I got anything back from it. I was actually went to go and do some seasonal butchery in Norway at one point, and then came back to England. And when I came back to England, there's a new supermarket opened in the town where I'm from, Carlisle, and they were looking for somebody to manage the butchery department and fishmonger side of it. I really enjoyed the butchery at the time. It was really interesting. Really enjoyed eating fish, but I didn't really understand the sort of skills and the nature of the job to it. And they used to Sainsbury's used to send you on like intensive training courses at their own colleges throughout the UK and their own stores. And there was like prize-winning fishmongers and butchers who'd do the training with you and sort of give you the tools to do the job. And it was, when I first started off, it was fantastic. But again, I was more into the butchery side, but I went away on this course to, I think it was Edinburgh for 3 days. And the first day and a half was the butchery. And the second day and a half was on the fishmongers course. And there was a gentleman called Richard Lucas. And he was a prize-winning fishmongers that had pinched from Morrison's at the time. And within half an hour or an hour of that fish course started, and watching him use that knife, and I think what got it for me was he did a block cut or a butterfly fillet of a mackerel. And I seen that and I just thought, wow, by butchery, I'm more interested in the fish side now. Like, that's it for me. I want to be like what he is, because as skilled as butchery is, it's pretty limited. You've got your 3 main species, and the cuts that you perform across all of them are very simple. Whereas with your fish, you could be doing this 25 years and you're still learning. Everything's constantly evolving. You've got hundreds of different species, all different flavors, all different preparation methods and stuff like that. It's just, it's a wormhole that you can get lost in and obsessed over. So yeah, I'd definitely say that Richard Lucas inspired me into changing tack from butchery to fishmongering, definitely. So I used to go on these courses, and then I got offered to start off what was like a trailblazer apprenticeship scheme with them as well. So I was one of the first people to go on that, the cohorts in the country. And then shortly after completion, I actually got picked by the company to go and represent them at the National Fishmongers Federation Championships, which is like, to dumb it down, it's like Master Chef, but across 2 days, but for fishmongers. So you've got a different set of tasks to do on different types of fish in like a set time, set order, and you're marked on your yield presentation and things like that. So I got the chance to do that, and then mentor other apprentices. It really was good when they invested in the training and sort of the skills and the quality of the products. It was fantastic. But then obviously after a while it changed and it was more budget orientated, and that's sort of when I jumped ships and went to independent fishmongers, because it's more the other way. They've got to invest in the training and the quality of the products, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I've been with Bells now for 6 years almost, which has been absolutely fantastic. As I said to you before, we started the interview, they sort of gave me a free rein to sort of make the concession my own. And it's been fantastic. It's gone from strength to strength. We've had 6 years of continuous growth. Won lots of national awards. It's just been fantastic. It's been unbelievable, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so last year, 2024, Bells Fishmonger was crowned Fishmonger of the Year by the UK's National Federation of Fishmongers. That must have been a very proud moment for you.
Oh, it's fantastic. To be honest with you, I didn't actually expect to win. It's something I've always wanted to win and be part of, but because the caliber's that high, I thought we'd maybe place, but there's probably no chance of winning. And then even on the back of that, before that, we'd won the Grocer Fishmonger of the Year. So it was just a fantastic year, to be honest with you. And the best thing, the Grocer Award Fishmonger of the Year was really important because that was sort of an independent judging panel, more to do with like the retail, like nationwide sort of thing. So like butchers, bakers, different bits and bobs, you're all involved in that. Whereas the Fishmongers one sort of meant a lot more because it was basically the industry itself and only for fishmongers. So the best of the best in the country sort of pick, if that makes sense. So it felt even better knowing that if they think we're the best, then it's worth 1,000 times more, if that makes sense. So no, it's brilliant. We're not entering this year in that. Well, I think we're going to take a bit of a hiatus for the next 3 years because they've asked us to judge for this year's competition of the Fishmongers Federation, and then the Grocer one, we won the previous year Best Fishmonger and Best Retailer in the Northwest. So we sort of got to a stage now where I think we don't want to carry on entering because it's nice to open up the field and it sort of feel like, oh, they've won it again or they've finalised again, you know what I mean? Because we were in the finals for like, I think, 5 years in a row. I think it's sometimes best to go out on top and take early retirement, as I would say.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like that, but it's also nice to give other businesses an opportunity to maybe show what they can do, because, and it also takes pressure off yourself because maybe something else that you'd like to.
And I'm super competitive. I'm my own worst enemy. So even if I could put a brilliant display on, I'm still overanalyzing it and thinking that it's not good enough. And every fillet I do, I think, damn, I could have done better. That's just my mentality for myself. But I suppose it keeps me on my toes because I'm always thinking what I can do, change and make things simpler, and just try and catch that elusive perfect fillet if it's available, if that makes sense. But that's right. It's mentally challenging, but then I suppose it drives me on at the same time.
So when they're judging your shop for Fishmonger of the Year, what's the criteria that they judge the
overall? So they used to have a craft competition, which was basically just based on the life skills, which had taken part in before. But now it sort of encapsulates everything because, and it's rightly so, because to be a good fishmonger, you have to have fantastic hygiene, you've got to have good sorting ethics, you've got to have fantastic customer service. It's a balance of everything. So they're marking you across all the board, because you could have the best produce in the world, but if you don't care about your customers or your shop's filthy, then you can't really call yourself a good fishmonger. So you've got to make sure you're ticking all the boxes and making sure everything's perfect. And it's sort of like trying to set examples for everybody else and maintain a high standard and try and inspire other shops at the end of the day. That's what it's all about.
And you also achieved yourself last year, you also became a Master Fishmonger. That must have been another highlight of the year for you.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And again, it was something that I thought I might have been rejected from, and they pushed it back and said, come back in a few years, because I think I'm the youngest by maybe about 3 or 4 years in the country. So I'd only just done 10 or 11 years. You see, you've got to have 10 years experience to apply for it. So you fill in the criteria. You've got to meet all these standards on your ethics, your training, what your job role is, your skills and your knowledge. And if that'll go to the panel of fishmongers and they'll say, right, you're accepted onto the standard. And then after that, you've got like assessment videos to do. You've got knowledge test, and you've also got like a professional discussion. So the skills videos, there's different tiers to the standard, and as the tiers go up, the videos get more detailed. So the ones that I had to complete, it was as if I was teaching somebody else from beginning to end. So what might be 30 seconds to fillet a sea bass actually ends up being a 10-minute video from beginning to end saying, this is a sea bass, this is where it comes from, how it's caught, what it tastes like, how to cook it, this is this preparation method, and so on. And you've got to do that across several different categories. And because you're doing it on the job, you've got to get somebody else to film you. You've got to do an introduction. It's got to be live. You can't do it in more than one take. So if a customer comes along halfway through your video, you've got to put your phone down and then carry on the video and then say the time and the date again. So it can actually be very time consuming. Some of them are actually probably half an hour long, because if you get a big queue of customers and stop, you've got to leave that and carry on serving and then go back to the video. And you've got to make sure you're talking through it as you're recording. And it's easy to do with a person, but when you realise you're on camera, it just adds another level of pressure to it, if that makes sense. So you complete those videos and then submit them, and then you got your knowledge sort of test to go through, which encapsulates basically not just fishmongering, obviously your industry, your fishing methods, and all the background of it and stuff like that. So you've got to do your research on that, and then one of the final parts is the professional discussion, which is basically an hour and a half to 2 hours phone call interview with another master fishmonger assessor. And I think it was around 60 questions. Again, 20 on the background of fishing, 20 on the fishmongering job itself, and 20 on like hygiene and everything else in between. And you've got to make sure you can answer all these questions in detail. But that was the one thing that I thought I was going to fail on, because I thought Roger's quite good, but compared to somebody that's been doing this 20, 30, 40 years, there's a big difference, because you're constantly picking up new things. But as it went on to about an hour and a half, 2 hours, he said, I think that's enough now. I think we've talked about it. So that was probably a sign that it was going well, if that makes sense. So no, and then once those have all been done, your evidence goes back to the panel, and they'll look through all your evidence, your application process, and your videos, and then they'll get back to you with a decision of whether they think you meet the criteria and are happy with what you've done. So I was sort of on the edge of my seat for a little bit, waiting for that decision to be made. But no, it was absolutely fantastic when I found out the good news. It was unbelievable.
It was a tough exercise to get there, but it really does show that, there is a real craft to fishmongering, and it's not just a case of just, walking in behind the counter and just going, that's a fish, that's a fish, that's a fish, and that's all you need to know. It has a real trade, a real craft, a real vocation, actually, because you have to spend so much time learning new stuff.
It's a passion. It's a way of life. Like, it's not, I don't see it as a job. I see it more like a paid hobby. Like when you enjoy what you do, you don't really work a day in your life, if that makes sense. And it's fantastic. And the people as well, and the community of like your customers, they've just basically become like one big family. It's fantastic, and it's quite at the same time, because probably I wouldn't say the average age of fishmongers is probably 40 going on 45. So there's not a lot of interest from younger people into it, because I suppose they think it's cold, it's wet, it's a smelly job. But there's so much more to it than that. You know what I mean? It can be very rewarding financially as well, because obviously it's a niche skill. Not many people can do it. The same with the butchery. Like, pay now is excellent, to be honest with you. If you've got the skills and the passion, you can sort of dictate what you want to earn at the end of the day, as an employed fishmonger. And then if you've got enough skills and the bravery to go self-employed and open your own shop, the world's your oyster at the end of the day. You can take your earnings even higher. So there's lots of opportunities, really lots of opportunities.
And there's also the opportunity probably to become a tutor or a teacher, and that as well, because that's another area that needs people to be working in as well.
Exactly. So like when I passed my assessment, I also was put on to be an assessor to sign off other fishmongers who complete the Master Fishmonger Assessment Scheme. So from top to bottom, and I think, like you said, that is the real problem, because you've got apprenticeship providers and you've got like places where you can do training, but it's quite often chef led. So it's not often that you'll find an actual trained fishmonger completing the training. So when I completed my apprenticeship at Sainsbury's, the internal training from Sainsbury's was fantastic because it was pro fishmongers. But then on the actual apprenticeship itself, it was a chef that was doing the training. And the way they do things to how we do it in the trade is completely different. They did actually at one point employ a prizeman in fishmonger from Sainsbury's to work from them. And when he was doing the courses and the training, it was fantastic because it was how it should have been. But for everybody else who didn't have that opportunity to be on that course with him, it's good, but it's not the same sort of level. It's completely different to how you'd do something in the restaurant to how we'd process and handle the fish on the counter, if that makes sense.
That's what I always say about meat. If you get a good Sunday roast and it's cut the right way by the butcher, and you put it in to the oven and you cook it, when you cut it yourself, it cuts the right with the grain for you, and it's very tender to eat. Whereas if you get it cut the wrong way, where if the butcher cuts it along with the grain to make it easy for himself, and gives you the meat then, and you cook it and you cut it, you're cutting it against the grain, which makes it a bit tougher.
It's all built.
Because I heard a few people talking about that, and it's something that I began noticing in certain places where I buy my. Don't tell anybody, but I do buy meat. So
You're right that there's a science to it, and like even going back to the butchery side of it, like the resting and how you roast your joint, and then the important thing of when you get it out the oven, turn it upside down to the way it's been cooked, and then all the juices will go back through it, and leave it under boil for 15 minutes, and then you're not having what's called because if you cook it from cold from the fridge, you get cold shortening, so the muscle contracts really tight, and the same when you try and eat it if it's not been rested. But the customer just might assume that it's a bad piece of meat if the butcher's not told them the story behind why it's like that. And it's the same goes for fish. So, not enough people in this country eat fish, and for a number of reasons. And I think a lot of that is down to the poor standard of products that they get in the supermarket nowadays, and the lack of confidence of how to cook it and understand it. So when the customer comes to my counter, even if they've got no confidence or no clue in that kitchen whatsoever, I can give them a product that's as easy as anything. So at the minute I've launched these, like we've always done cook in the bag, but everybody's got air fryers at the moment. So I've got some foil trays, and I've just been basically prepping products to go straight in the air fryer or the normal oven. All the instructions on it, marinades, butters, all the prep's done. So they just pop it in for the 10 minutes or whatever, and it's ready to go. They've got a ready meal with none of the downsides, if that makes sense. Some little things like that. And again, has been fantastic. So I wasn't expecting them to be as high demand the first couple of weeks I was making them, but I've doubled what I planned to do. So it's gone fantastic. But yeah, little things like that make a massive difference. Whereas when you go to the supermarket, you don't get that. You don't get that service. If you want one salmon portion, tough, you've got to buy a packet of 2. If you want salmon with the skin off, tough, you've got to buy a packet of 2 with the skin on. Or if you want the skin off, you've got to pay a premium, and you're still going to buy 2. That to me, the sort of customers that come to us as an independent will actually probably never go to the supermarket to buy fish because there's that disappointed in it. So the supermarkets are all missing out on these customers because they just don't want to eat that product because it's that bad. So if they had the skilled people, if they had the people to prepare the product, they'd have that market, but they're completely disregarding it altogether, which is just disastrous for them, really.
So, speaking to you now, you have a great understanding of your product that you're selling to customers. So it definitely makes me think that you're a fish person yourself.
Oh, yes, yeah. Don't eat a lot of meat, like maybe 3 or 4 times a week, but fish probably sometimes 3 times a day. So I had tinned mackerel for my dinner, which is a guilty pleasure of mine, has been since I was a child. And then one of my wholesale customers who makes sashimi brought me in a sashimi platter, so I had a little bit of that, and once we're started with this, I've got some nice fish cakes to have with some boiled potatoes as well. So that's me 3 portions of fish in a day. Yeah.
So where did the love of fish come from?
I've always liked eating fish. I wasn't so big on shellfish when I was younger, but I spent a lot of my childhood at my grandparents, and they used to take me fishing. Used to go to the Lake District sailing, and you used to basically catch trout, grayling, things like that. And then they used to take us on like sailing holidays to Greece, and the Greeks love their fish. And in this 2-week sailing holiday, every restaurant we went to, I asked for little fish, which is basically sprats of sardines, and they were just grilled with lemon. And I didn't eat anything apart from that and swordfish for the entire holiday. But yeah, just kippers in the bag, everything. I've just always loved fish to eat. Obsessed some ways, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing, because you know it's taking you into a very, very valuable trade. You know, and passion drives people on to their passion. If that makes sense, like, you know. So now
you'll never guess what star sign I am either.
Pisces.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, as they say, the stars aligned.
Exactly. And my second name, obviously, it's a fitting name for a fishmonger, Cutting, isn't it? So
Cutting. Yeah. When it happened for you, you definitely did. So that was a fantastic journey to get to where you are today, and it's great to know that there's people out there with that much passion and that much knowledge about fish and how to present it to the customer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a few questions on a few different fish, and maybe you can let us know what's the best way to get the product given to you, and what's the best way to cook it, just quickly. So cod, what's the best way to get cod? Fillet, steak, how would you recommend it?
For me personally, I would always say bone-in cutlets, so like you bone-in steaks, and then make a nice stew of it. So if you make a nice tomato stew, that's quite sweet, whereas your cod's got an earthy taste compared to your other whitefish like haddock, which is sweet. So cod lends itself better to dishes like that. So a nice rich and vibrant tomato stew, and then just simmer away your cod steaks at the very end for like 5 or 6 minutes. Actually, I'm more of a haddock man myself, and I always say to customers, like, there's a massive obsession in the UK with cod. But for me, there are other better value and better tasting fish out there, but cod is it's like a religion to some people. It's like, oh no, I don't like haddock, and you think to yourself, no, I bet you'd like a lot of other fish if you tried them. So I always try and push them onto like hake or Corley, because at the same time it saves them a bit of money, because particularly recently, so there's a cod and haddock quarter cuts, and whitefish prices and monkfish prices at the moment are sky high, to the point that we're selling cod and haddock at a loss to wholesale customers and only just breaking even to the retail. But it's sort of reached a ceiling where you can't put that price up anymore because no one's going to buy it. So for the last few months, I've been getting different whitefish in, like Coley, pollock and whiting, just as something alternative. And a lot of customers are now choosing to go for that instead, and it's saving them a bit of money, and then it's taking the pressure off paying that big price for cod all the time as well.
Well, yeah, personally, I'm not a huge fan of cod. I like cod. Like yourself, I love haddock. If I was out getting fish and chips and there was haddock on the menu and cod on the menu, I would always take the haddock.
Yeah.
And I always get criticized for this, but personally, my favorite fish is pollock. Yeah. We were raised with it around here, and for some reason, it's always been my favorite.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to your questions, because we're going back now to haddock. Which is the best way for it to be presented?
My favorite recipe for the haddock is as a fillet. So what I do is I make a nice. So you get some skin on new potatoes, cut them in half, Parboil them in some salted water, but save that salted water until later on. Put your potatoes to one side, put your skin on haddock fillets in a roasting tray, put a cupful of the starchy water from the potatoes in, a small glass of white wine, a little bay leaf, some parsley, and a little squeeze of lemon. And basically leave that to one side, and then get 2 red onions and cut them up into little chunks, pop them in a pan with some olive oil, and you're just going to basically reduce those onions right down until they become really sticky like a jam. And once we're at that stage, I pop in a tablespoon of smoked paprika and let that coat all those onions. Once they're nice and jammy and sticky like that, fish is going to go in the oven in the potato water and the wine to poach for around 10 minutes. And while that's poaching, the potatoes that I've cooked earlier, I'm going to pop into the caramelized red onion mixture, put it back on the heat, and just coat them in that nice sticky, jammy pepper sauce. Not pepper, sorry, onion, that caramelized onion. And as they're warming through, the fish is just about done. Place your potatoes on the bottom, take your fish out of the top, just peel the skin off, and then put a little bit of the water that you've poached the fish in and just ladle that over the top, and it's the perfect balance between sweet and savoury and everything. It's delicious. You can even add a little bit of chorizo in with your caramelised onions at the same time as well if you want, but no, it's to die for. And you get to drink the other 2 glasses of wine from the bottle as well.
There's always a bonus when you have wine.
Yeah.
Anything
Yeah.
involving cooking with wine, there is always the added bonus.
But
It
yeah,
sounds...
that recipe is like a BBC Good Food recipe. It actually is for hake, but I prefer the haddock myself, but it will work with any whitefish. But no, it's a really, really good one.
Let's move up to the high-end fish, like monk fish. What
Yeah.
would be the best way to present a monkfish?
Actually, for me, boneless fillets with the skin off, and two ways you can go. Cut a little slice in the centre, some sun-dried tomatoes, a little bit of spinach, Parma ham or serrano ham wrapped around it, or you can go cream cheese, rosemary, and the Parma ham wrapped around it, and then like 30 to 35 minutes in the oven at 180. But you can sort of cheat and do it in one pan. So wedges or new potatoes, parboil them first, and then roast them in the same tray that you roast in your monkfish, and all the juices cook in. You can add some garlic, some onions, and vegetables in there, and you've got yourself like a tray bake with the monkfish, and then generally slice it into sort of discs, and then a bit of that, the juices from the pan at the end, just pour it back over with all the potatoes. Really nice.
Oh, I think we're going to finish this interview now. I'm very hungry. No, but suppose now we'll move to a more common fish, such as mackerel. People find it always in tins on the shelf in the supermarket, but it's also a very nice fish to cook at home.
Yeah. And it's actually my favourite eating fish, along with sardines and herring. Always have been and always will be. I like it any which way, smoked, tinned, under the grill as a whole fish. And there's so much you could do with it. And the best part of it, so cheap. People run you and price dictates quality of flavour when it doesn't. Price is often to do with demand and how much of something there is. And there's so much mackerel, that's why it's so cheap. The one thing, I absolutely love feta cheese, so I was experimenting the other day. So different types of tomatoes. So some large tomatoes, plum tomatoes, and cherry tomatoes, cut in half, put in a silver tray to go under the grill. Olive oil, oregano, and a little bit of balsamic vinegar just glazed over the top of those, and then a butterfly mackerel fillet skin side up, and then I just cut a block of feta cheese and put the feta cheese on top of the tomatoes, and then just underneath the grill for about 10 minutes, and all the feta caramelizes and drips into the tomatoes, and the mackerel skin blackens up, and then take it out, pour some of the juices back over the top, and then just a little balsamic glaze over the top at the end. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. My 2 favourite things, cheese and fish.
Well, that's what you call it. I'd say that's a lethal combination.
Indeed, yeah.
You need a glass of wine to wash that down.
What's the third deadly?
There's so many different types of fish,
Oh yeah,
which is amazing. Like, you know, there's less when you walk into a butcher shop. There's less available meat on the butcher shop counter. So when somebody walk into your fishmongers, what would the display be like? What would be sort of the rarities that you'd have, and what would be the common big sellers that you'd have?
Big sort of things like your shellfish are a bit more niche. So like you'll find probably shellfish is quite 50-50 in terms of being Marmite. A lot more people are open to eating most types of fish. Whereas the shellfish, it's either you love it or you absolutely hate it. But I think a lot of that is down to the lack of understanding of how to cook it and prepare it. So like I was trying to say, if I put whole squid just on the counter as it is, it's fantastic for somebody who knows what they're doing with it. But you've got all the other types of customers who actually would eat it in a restaurant, but they don't know how to do the prep. So when I'm displaying it on the counter, you've got your whole squid and then you've got your tubes and your rings as well. So then you're maximising your sales output then, because you're not just aiming for one market, you're aiming for the confident cook and then the cook who might need a little bit of help and some of the prep and bottom. Same with like sea urchins and oysters. A lot of people eat them, but are they confident to do the prep? So if I'm here to do the prep, so like an oyster platter or a sea urchin platter, they just go home and it's ready to go and all the work's done for them. And I think that's the service that's missing from a lot of places. Well, that's missing from supermarkets and why they can't sell as much high-end, high-quality products. And it just rattles back to that discussion before about, walking into a car dealership and if the car dealer can't tell you the first thing about the car or help you out with it, you're going to run a mile. Whereas if you go in and they can tell you everything about it and say, well, this is how you drive it, this is the speed, this is what you do here and there, it puts you at ease and you've got complete trust. And that's the most important thing, to be honest with you. And I think you've got to have a good rapport with your customer. So I was trying to assess when someone comes in at first is what are the confidence levels? What have you eaten before? What sort of fish do you like? A lot of things. People say, oh, I like eating fish, but I don't eat enough of it, but I just don't know what to do. And I want to try new things. So I always start off by saying, well, what have you tried before? And I always go for the strongest flavoured fish, because normally if they like something like salmon, tuna or mackerel, they should in theory like the lesser flavoured fish. So like your milder whitefish and sea bass and sea bream and things like that. And then trying to understand whether they like fish on the bone or completely boneless. Because again, they might say, oh, I absolutely love mackerel, but if you don't say, do you like it on the bone, and you give them a fish and they give it full of bones, they're going to hate it. You know what I mean? So it's important to know the customer's needs and make sure they get the product that they need and want.
Yeah, I suppose maybe that's the thing that people who's involved with fish most of their lives sort of forget. For somebody coming in off the street, it's probably playing on their mind that there's a lot of different varieties of fish. How do I cook them? Do I have to cook them all different ways, or is there one way you can cook them all? Or we tend not to think about that as much when you're sort of used to fish.
Yeah. That's precisely it. So that they get worried about it. To me, meat is lovely, quite simple to cook, but fish is even better and even easier to cook. So it's nature's fast food. Like if I look at my counter, really, there's nothing on that counter with the exception of things like octopus that can't be ready in under 20 minutes. And you've got a lovely flavours and meal. No waste, no mess at the end of the day. Whereas if you go to a meat counter, you've got all those different cuts, but each of them's got a different specific cooking method and time, and it takes a lot longer, and there might be a bit more prep to it. So I think that's probably another reason why I've always liked fish as well, because it's so quick and simple. When you're in a rush and you've got a million and one things to do, and you get home, you think, oh, don't want to be doing this and that. I'll just whack some fish fillets under the grill or in the pan, and in 10 minutes they're ready, and it's as simple as that.
You were talking about home cooking there. COVID-19 seen an increase in people doing a lot more cooking at home, and there seemed to be a lot more demand for seafood during that period. Over the past 4 years, has that carried on? You think?
Yes, but I'd say the amount of time people had on their hands has dropped. So whereas they were coming in several times a week and just exploring every single option, and they were basically becoming master chefs at home, trying everything just to keep themselves entertained. I think that was the two hobbies people had. They either bought DJ equipment or they learned to cook, if you know. But yeah, it definitely made a big difference. I think, obviously, not from my generation, but I would say back in the day, everybody was an ingredients household. They went out, they got the vegetables, they got the fish, they got the meat, and they made everything from scratch, and they had the time to do that. Whereas now, everybody's got busy lifestyles, working different hours. So they want tasty food, but they just don't really have the time to cook it all the time. And I think that's where we miss out, because if you go in a supermarket or any shop, you're bombarded with branding of ultra-processed foods. And you can't get away from it. If you look at the section of vegetables and fresh meats and fresh fish, it's tiny, whereas the rest of the shop is just filled with bright colours and advertisement. And I think the customer doesn't really know where to look. You know, you've got bold claims being put on labels, you know, healthy, full of protein, low fat, such and such, and it just confuses them. It really confuses them. And I always try and say to them, the best thing about fish is it's just fish, nothing added, nothing taken away. The more you change something, the worse it is for you, you know what I mean? And the price of it as well, like, people don't understand, like, food in this country is actually really, really cheap. So, like, you can get a kilo of mussels for £5, and that'll do a pasta for 4 or 5 people, or a main for 2 or 3. You know, you've got mackerel, sardines and herrings, which are under £7 a kilo. It can be very cheap if you make it cheap, but if you go straight to cod and halibut and salmon, it's going to be more pricey. But yeah, it's just trying to educate them as best as possible that you can make better decisions, and you can eat really tasty food on a good budget. And then that's beside it as well, just trying to give them the skills. And I sort of make it my mission, every product on that counter, if somebody comes up and say, how do you cook that? I need to be able to say at least one recipe off the top of my head. You know, and I've got a table at the front as well with like 4 or 5 different recipe books, and you could just have a flick through that, take a picture of a recipe and take that away. Just trying to give them all the tools they need to be able to do it, and then reassure them that it can be done in 10, 15 minutes rather than half an hour, 2 hours slaving away in the kitchen. Yeah, it's definitely a different time that we live in now compared to how it used to be, that's for sure.
Yeah, I always say to people, if you get really confused about fish and about how to cook it, salt and pepper, and let the taste of the fish do it for you. Like, you know, there's very few, there's no fish out there that's got no taste.
Yeah.
You know? And I think once you fall in love with the taste of fish, it's easy then to take it to other places when you're cooking it.
Oh yeah,
doing different things with it. Like, you know, I've a few of my own recipes I want to divulge them. But I just love cooking fish, and that's just one of my things.
Don't get me wrong. There's what I call the purist customer who. So I have a lot of Italian customers and some French and some Spanish, and they're what I'd call the purist customer. So they buy that product and they don't want to adulterate it at all. So the oysters. They'll buy the oysters every week, they'll buy the mussels every week, and they'll cook the exact same recipe. They'll say, oh no, I don't want to spoil it, but I say, you do have it every week. You're not going to spoil it. It's just nice to have a little bit of a change sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you're eating oysters every week, do you really want to be just eating the plain oyster every single time you buy them? You know, you can have different mignonettes, you can have some plain, you can have a mixture, you know, there's 1,001 different things. But yeah, we're creatures of habit that way, I suppose.
Yeah, some people just get used to a certain palate, and they just like it, and that's their. It's like people who stopped listening to new music in 1972. There's people out there who've done that, and they still think certain bands from the 1960s are great, and they never moved on from that. So, you know, that's sort of their that's their prerogative, but that's sort of happens. Why should young people get involved in becoming fishmongers?
It's just such a rewarding career. You know, the people, your customers, the community that you can get involved with is just fantastic. You know, you sort of become like a big family, and the best side of it as well is obviously there's not a lot of people going into this career path, so you can sort of pick and choose where you want to go, what you want to do. You can have opportunities to travel the world. Like I'm a home comforts person, so I have been offered quite regularly to go to like Boston to seafood expos, and there's one in Barcelona in a few months' time that we've been asked to go to. But as much as it'd be good, I'm a home comfort sort of person, but there's lots of people out there who might like to do that. Or years and years ago, before I left Sainsbury's, I was offered to go and work in the to be one of the trainers, but obviously that was working nationally and being away from home 4 or 5 days a week. And as much as I enjoy the training side of it, it's not for me being away from home. But then there's lots of people again that enjoy that side of it, getting to travel to different places, meet new people all the time. You know, it's fantastic, and the skills and the learning side of it, you're constantly adapting and learning. So you'll know yourself when you're updating your fishing news. I'm on there every single day, looking at the latest articles to see what's happened, because there's that much legislation and rule changes all the time that it's almost impossible to keep up with it sometimes. Frustratingly so. So you tell somebody a rule one day, and then 3 weeks later, it's a completely different thing.
Yeah, I suppose that's something that people would not generally associate with the fishmongers, is the fact that you do have to know where your supply of fish is coming from and when it's coming from. Like, you know, that's another dimension to the whole business.
Yeah, and that's one thing in the last few years people have become more aware of where their food comes from, how it's raised, how it's caught. You know, it's very important to people now. Well, not everybody, but a certain community, they're more focused on that, and rightly so, because if there's no question about the sourcing of things, it's a bit of a free for all. So when someone comes up and says, right, where's this fish come from? I want to be able to say, right, it was caught off this vessel, landed at this market, went to this processor, and it's ended up in Carlisle at this time. You know, the only unit that we don't do is sort of say fishing vessels and the names of the fishermen, because it's a bit of a cutthroat industry. So if you name your suppliers, basically you'll have every other fishmonger in the country going to speak to them and say, all right, we want to buy that instead, and we'll give you a bit more money. You know, there's a bit of that to it, but it's got to be as transparent as possible. You know what I mean? It's really, really important, particularly when like things like so your aquaculture and your farmed fish. There's a massive, massive, massive amount of misinformation and propaganda out there, which a lot of people buy into, that they've seen on social media. And you know, there is the truth, but nobody wants to hear the truth. You know, the lies and the myths that spread are much more interesting and get much more attention, unfortunately. And it's a shame, because to me, farmed fish and farmed meat are hand in hand when it's done correctly and ethically. You need one and you need the other. You can't say, well, you can only eat wild salmon. Well, there's not enough wild salmon up there to be able to do that at the end of the day. You know, you've got to think of solutions rather than saying, oh, well, I'm just not going to eat that fish, you know.
If somebody was passing through Carlisle or somebody's living in Carlisle, where can they find you?
So we've got the 2 shops to choose from at Junction 43. And if you head off to that, just on the left, I'm in the Pioneer Food Store concession. Pre-packed 7 days a week, and the wet counters Tuesday to Saturday, like traditional fishmongers hours. So we get the fishmongers weekend of a Sunday and a Monday off. Leave an extra day for the hangover us to see. And that's probably a good thing for to market towards anyone want to get to it. They go out early on the Saturday night. You know, they've got an extra day to recover before they're due back in work. And then the main shop up at Kingstown, up at the next junction, is just on the industrial hub up there, and they do the same trading days, Tuesday to Saturday, but they start a lot earlier in the morning and finish earlier. So some of them are in 3 o'clock and finished at 3 o'clock, whereas I'm the layabout that has the lay-in from 7:30 till 5 in the afternoon instead.
Well, if anybody's in the neighbourhood, I'm sure they'll want to call in and see your shop and the variety of fish that you're offering. Hayden, thank you very much for joining us today. And it's been a very interesting chat. And hopefully, maybe sometime again, we'll have you on when you maybe become the master fishmonger.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Fishing Daily podcast has been produced in association with Colat Conversaja and Charlanta. Podcast music is by Oliver McBride. If you like this episode or any of our other episodes, please hit the subscribe button and show your support for independent homes in the fishing industry. Thank you.